All right, where are we editing today? I want to continue editing in Salida, Colorado. So this is just a little bit southwest of Denver here. I got a buddy who lives in the Salida area, and it was okay on OpenStreetMap. There was some cool land use stuff that people had done around here, and the streets were generally good. A couple of the intersections hadn't been updated in a while. This is as of like a week ago. But a lot of the buildings were missing, and there also were a lot of footpaths, bicycle, sort of like navigation type stuff that really hadn't been worked on very much. And then there's these two schools down here. There's also, I believe this is an elementary school right here, but in this southern area of Salida, you've got the high school and middle school right next to each other. And a lot of the features around those schools have not been mapped very much. So I've done a little bit of that, but I think that'll be another mapping session. Right now, I've been looking at a lot of the sidewalks. I like to get the sidewalks into a place just because I like walking. So for me, it's useful to have pedestrian navigation options on my mobile apps and stuff like that. But I also think it makes the map just look a lot better, a lot more full, makes it feel like a more inviting city. So yeah, a lot of reasons why I like sidewalks, but that's sort of what I've been focusing on. So there were basically no sidewalks in Salida as of a couple weeks ago. I have put in, as you can see, I hope you can see these in the recording, but there's a bunch of dotted red lines that go all around these grids here. So those are all sidewalks, and I'll zoom in and show you what I mean a little bit better in just a minute here. But yeah, so just a lay of the land. This is the downtown area of Salida. You've got the Arkansas River going by here. It's a fairly decent little river. Like people take their rafts and like I think kayaks and that type of thing down the river. So definitely like a point of interest here. And there's a lot of different like parks and other trails that go along the Arkansas River. We have what was it called? Monarch Spur Trail, I believe is what it's called. This bike path that goes east-west, basically, right along here. I did a mapping session on that yesterday, so it's looking a little bit better. And then down in this area, I know it looks like there's just buildings here, but believe it or not, there's actually buildings all across here. My new friend on OpenStreetMap, Traveling Car, just put in a bunch of these buildings, which is awesome. And I think they're maybe going to look at doing another section. I might also get into building mapping after I do some of these sidewalks. And then you have, this is US 50 right over here, which is funny. US 50 actually goes through my hometown in Northern Virginia as well. It's the same highway, but it also goes through Salida here. And this is kind of Strode vibes. It's a little bit more highway-esque, but there's a lot of like parking lots and businesses along here as well. So sometimes the sidewalks will stretch all the way down to 50, and it's just generally a place where like a lot of people travel. So it's nice to get some of that mapped a little bit better. Zooming out here just a little bit, we have Tenderfoot Hill over on sort of the northeast side of town here. There's a big S up on that hill. So if you look up pictures of Salida, you'll probably see like a picture of a mountain with an S on it. That's Tenderfoot Hill. And I've actually never been over on that side of Arkansas River, but it looks like there's a lot of interesting trails and maybe even a road that goes all the way up there. So a lot of fun things. I might try to get some mapping done over on that side, but honestly, it looks pretty good. There's all those, I believe those are like river crossings or bridges, all of those icons over there. So clearly someone cares about that area, which is awesome. Some named trails and stuff like that. Okay. It also amazes me. I've never seen a golf course that wasn't well mapped on OpenStreetMap. I don't know who does this, but props. They look great. Okay. So sidewalk wise, I started over in this area actually. I don't know why, but the sidewalks just kind of looked easier and I wanted to get something into the map. So those were all sort of done. And then I started sort of stretching this way. And then I spent sort of a day doing the high school and middle school. And I think those are looking a bit better. There's definitely more work to do in that area, but like for now I'm going to move on. And as you can see, this sort of middle section, I've gotten a lot done. I did this big sort of spree of mapping yesterday on this area. So I'm feeling fairly good about it, but there's definitely a few like little stranglers, and then there's a bunch of other areas over here that, like, who knows? There might be fewer sidewalks in this area, but there might be a lot. I'm not sure. I haven't really looked at the imagery as much over there. So lots to explore. Another thing I've been thinking a lot about around here is aerial imagery offset. If you're not familiar with what that is, that's totally okay. I'll explain it as it comes up. But sometimes when you're looking at aerial imagery, which, you know, isn't super accurate to begin with, like you're kind of working with what you got. So what happens is aerial imagery, of course, isn't one picture of the entire Earth, because that doesn't make sense. You can't take a picture of the entire surface of the Earth. It's a sphere. So what they do is they take these nice high-def pictures of regions, and then they stitch them together. And usually the stitching is pretty good, and you don't really notice where the line is between the two images. But if you scroll in and you zoom and see the, like, the highest resolution possible portions of that image, you start to notice where those seams are between those images. And as well as they do stitching them together, there are sometimes mismatches or like bad overlaps where basically things get misaligned. And what happens then is that if you're following the aerial image to the T and you're putting everything into the map as it appears on the aerial image, you might realize that that image itself was shifted away from where it actually is in real life. Like everything's moved over a little bit because the image just kind of doesn't line up perfectly. And like, this is just a fact of armchair mapping is what this called, where you just use aerial imagery and try to map somewhere. Like, I'm located in Richmond, Virginia right now. Like I can't see what I'm mapping in Salida. I'm just kind of going with what I got. But anyways, this is a constant concern when you're armchair mapping, because you want to make sure everything is lined up as well as possible, and you don't want to like make up data or make up accuracy when you don't have it, right? Like it's almost, I don't want to say it's dangerous, but like it's kind of annoying probably to a local mapper when something's so meticulously put in place. You have a lot of like detail with lots of nodes. Maybe you put specific trees in, but if everything's spatially maladjusted or whatever, where it's like in the wrong spot, like that's kind of annoying. So anyways, I'm trying not to like focus too much on like accuracy, because I can't. Like there's only so much I can do here. So it's sort of striking a balance where it's like, what's the best I can do in this situation? And like, what is good enough that if someone looked at this map, they would know where to go. If their phone showed them their location on this map, it would be close enough that they'd be able to figure out what's going on, how to get to the store, or something like that. Okay, so I, funnily enough, haven't really looked at the downtown area very much when it comes to sidewalks. Like I've just been looking at these sort of outskirts. So I think that might be a nice place to start. I'm going to zoom in here. It actually looks like there are a decent number of sidewalks already in here and some crossings. One thing that I was thinking about a bit is I do like to try to map sidewalks or other trails with their surface types. And there are brick and concrete sidewalks that I've noticed downtown in Salida. So we might have to do some split ways and stuff like that to get everything tagged correctly. Okay, so I'm going to hop into the editor here. That was a long intro. So we're using my trusty ID editor. This is usually what I use to do this type of mapping. I'm just going to hit edit now. If you haven't used the ID editor, though, you totally should go through that tutorial because it's really nice. So what we have here is the same data that we were just looking at with OpenStreetMap, but now we have this sort of aerial view laid underneath it. So we can see this is a Bing map aerial, I believe. You can check by hitting the background settings. Sometimes I'll move back and forth between these. Bing Maps is one of my more tried and true. Like, it just generally seems more accurate because it lines up very well with other data that I've compared things to. So Bing Maps is great. Sometimes Esri World Imagery has better orthographic views. Or they just have like slightly higher resolution pictures in certain areas. Sometimes Esri comes through, but most of the time, Bing is usually a little bit better. And then depending on the situation, sometimes I'll pop into one of these other ones, but I won't go through all of them right now. Okay, so we are looking down along F Street here, It's all sort of coming back to me because I've did a bunch of these crossings recently. There is sort of this aerial imagery offset divide sort of around in this area. I don't know if it's actually where the where the stitch happens in the aerial imagery. I don't know if it's actually here or if previous data imports or creations were off for some other reason. So all I know is that around here, I usually have to shift my big maps image back and forth. And I will at some point probably have to compare it with other imagery and see if I can find where that stitch line is or something like that. But I'm not going to worry about that too much right now. I think it's better just to get the basic elements in here. So as you can see, this is a pretty good example of like an easy to add area. We have some marked crossings up here. Probably going to add a couple of tags to them, which I'll show you in a minute. We've got a couple of marked crossings down here that I'm pretty sure I put these in last time I edited, but I sort of decided to stop here. At some point you gotta just, go to bed. So I'm gonna try to add the rest of this block in here and then see where it takes us. Okay, so first of all, I'm just gonna check my aerial image offset. It looks like north-south I'm pretty good, but east-west I'm going to need to change a little bit. So I use this little drag tool in the background settings, the imagery offset, and I'm going to move us right like that. And it's nice because I was just here the other day, so I have a certain amount of trust here that like I generally have the right spot. I'm going to scroll over to a couple other intersections and make sure things are lining up okay. So that looks all right. I think I actually do want to go back over a little bit like this. Yeah. This looks like something I mapped when I had like sort of like after a while that I've been editing, I feel more confident about my aerial imagery offset because I've seen it compared against more things. So I like finally adjust it for a minute. You know what I mean? Like I compare it against a few different areas. And then after a while, I start feeling pretty confident that like I have it dialed in. It's like actually reflecting. Yeah, like look at this now. This looks pretty good. Like all of those sidewalks are lining up. Those streets look okay, although to be perfectly honest, like all the streets just kind of look okay around here. So we do what we can. I like this. I think this is pretty good. And I don't really feel like messing with it any further. It's going to be productive. So I'm going to keep this offset for now. Let's add the final couple of marked crossings here. So I'm just adding a line across, what street is this? E Street. And I'm going to come over to the search and search for marked crossing. Perfect. And then it gives you this prompt if you want to connect it to the street, which you always do, because then like it's clear to the user what street you're crossing. I'm going to zoom in here and I'm going to add another marked crossing from here over to here. These marked crossings have tactile bumps. So those little rectangles there are tactile bumps. I try to add those in the tags, but every once in a while I leave it to another time. So I might leave those until the next time I map. So here's sort of a decision point, right? So I mapped to the sidewalk center line basically over on this corner and kind of on this corner. This is a lazier situation. I could like disconnect this and move this over here, if that makes sense. And then like make this shape a little bit more true to like where the person would actually walk, like that. I think that looks okay, actually. I'm okay with that. And then there's a shortcut S, which lets you straighten these lines, which I think looks a little bit nicer. Since like, I'm not trying to create data that isn't there. I try to just put straight lines whenever I can. Okay, I think that looks a-okay. And then what I like to do is just, I need to mark this as a marked crossing and connect the features. And I'm going to select these two center guys. And I like to change these middle nodes that connect to the roads. Right now they're just tagged as crossings. I like to be specific and call those marked crosswalks. They look nicer on the render and they're more accurate. So win-win. All right, let's throw in some sidewalk here. This is a concrete sidewalk. Whether or not I tag the surface is partially related to like how I'm feeling that day, but also like if there's a bunch of different mixed surfaces in the area, I'll try to like discern between them a little bit better, because like otherwise another mapper might not really realize like why. All right, look at this. So clearly we've met an offset issue here, right? Like those sidewalks were clearly painted in, or whatever you want to say, with a very different aerial offset, or perhaps real data, although I doubt it. I think it's probably safe to say that these were put in by another user using aerial imagery. So who do we trust? That's a good question. If we keep scrolling down here, we can see everything is still shifted. So the aerial imagery shifted a little bit north, I guess it would be. Yeah, shifted a little northwest. Or the data's shifted a little southeast. So a couple of things I'm noticing here. This alley is like, bam, right on. It's hard to say if that's like because someone had better data for it or if that was an error in of itself. This trend continues, although this looks like it's shifted up a bit more to the northeast here. Very interesting. I was the one who drew in some of these features. Like, I don't know who to trust at this point. This is confusing. B Street centerline does look a little south. All right. So this is the situation where like I just got to make a decision. You know what I mean? Like I could spend so much time trying to analyze this, but ultimately like I'm using aerial imagery to begin with. Like it's not going to be great. So I just got to put something in. Park Avenue looks like it is very far south, and that does line up with everything else that I've seen. So I am going to pull this up a little bit, just a tad. And I think we can live with that. Maybe I pulled it up a little too high. Let's put it back a little bit. Yeah. Okay. So as I was just saying, like it can't be perfect, but I feel better about this just comparing everything to each other. I think this offset makes sense. Oh, geez. So here we are in this area where like we just can't tell who's right and who's wrong. I'm going to actually, this is a perfect example of a time when I want to pop into another. Okay, so there's Esri World imagery. And as you can see, we just have less data to work with here, which is kind of unfortunate. But basically what I'm looking at here is I know that there's a difference, right, on the left side and the right side of the screen where like over here, everything feels like it's shifted over to the left, depending on your perspective. And over here, excuse me, everything looks like it's shifted to the right. So like, what are we going to do? I'm going to check out a couple other image sources here. Here's Mapbox Satellite. So all the different aerial imagery sources are going to, yeah, and look how unfortunate that is. Mapbox also seems confused. Like it seems to be equally bad in Mapbox. You see that? So it's like over here, this street is right on, basically, right down the center. I mean, give or take, right? And then over here, D Street, that's like fully on the south side of that street, right? Like one of these is wrong. I could put D Street in the center line. That looks pretty good. And now E Street is like all the way over. Well, not all the way. So that's not really helping. Let's see if I can find another data source. Comparing a bunch of different aerial imagery sources at least gives me some confidence that like the error is bigger than I can handle or the error is like more specifically in being aerial, for example, and then I can like switch over and use a different one until I'm confident I have things placed out correctly. So actually, this feels a little bit better. We have a bit more of a centerline situation over here and a centerline situation over here and down here. So this is almost like our best case scenario. And I wonder if some of this data came from, what am I using right now? Maxar Premium Imagery. Thank you, Maxar. So decisions. I like this. I think this looks pretty good. Like everything is generally in place here. Oh, I say that and then I go north and now look at this. This guy's pretty far off, isn't he? But then I look at this trail that I mapped the other day. That's pretty on. It's a little bit shifted to the northwest in this view. I picked a hard one to start with this series on. Jeez. People are going to find this channel and be like, is this what you do every Friday evening? I'm like, yeah, I guess so. Okay. Well, I guess this is when I should say, like, you're watching this. Leave a comment. Let me know what I did wrong and if you have a better opinion about what the aerial imagery should look like here. I think we are somewhat winning because we have a lot of these streets lining up pretty well. And what I'm going to do is think, well, what if I shift this up a little bit further to the northwest so that we get really, oh, I was about to say really on. Actually, okay, so if you go down G Street here, look at this. So west first, that's a little far off in that direction. So that, like, that's in its whole different world over there. That doesn't look like it's drawn very well, though. It looks like a lot of people have messed with this road. I wouldn't feel too bad about editing that. I bet you that's just a Tiger import anyways. If you're not sure what a Tiger import is, it's basically a federal data set of streets that was imported into OpenStreetMap once upon a time. And it still plagues us to this day because it was a very loose representation of the actual road network. Let's just put it that way. Okay, so like this street like actually bends up here. I'm going to have it bend in a little bit because I don't see that in any of the imagery. We've been looking at this quite a lot. And I think this matches a little bit better to the other things I've seen. Although these sidewalks are so far off in comparison. My goodness. All right. I think I'm going to pop back into Bing Maps aerial here for a minute. And isn't that just so much nicer? And that imagery still lines up pretty nicely. So I'm going to try shifting a few of these things south and see if it hurts too bad. That's what I'm thinking. So, yeah. Oh, jeez. Control Z. Okay. Can we straighten this line? It bends too much. Okay, no problem. We'll put that right there. That actually does look okay. And I'll straighten that guy. Not sure if this is what I'm going to keep. Once again, like, I've already said this a few times, but this is not rocket science. I'm just kind of trying to do the best that I can because I know, like, this probably isn't the type of thing that people are going to edit very often. And, you know, it's nice to get it done the first time. So we'll do what we can. I know that sidewalk is a little far north, but I just don't think it matters, to be perfectly honest. I think I'm probably the only person who cares about that. Okay. So we're shifting a couple of things northward here. And, you know, I can spam Control Z if this starts feeling like a bad idea. Which, you know, we might be at that stage pretty soon here. Because a lot of these sidewalks look kind of wrong. Have I mapped all of Salida incorrectly? I don't think so. I think I shouldn't worry about it too much. I've adjusted some areas over here that are close to the issue, and I'm comfortable with that. Basically, we've blended the seam a little bit more, and I think that's good. Like that's all we can do in this situation, right? Like that's all we set out to do in the very beginning anyways. So basically I have made the sidewalks a little bit more internally consistent with each other. If you look at them with any aerial imagery and you line them up, hopefully once you line them up in whichever aerial imagery you're using, they'll be internally consistent, i.e. they'll match up between each other once they're all lined up together. Okay, so I adjusted that a little bit, and this still looks pretty good. I'm going to move this guy over just a tad. And I think we're already doing pretty good here. And I might even leave this. Okay, that's fine. I guess it's an art. It's not a science. Sort of a science. I don't know. Okay. See, this I do this type of thing and then I get really annoyed by it, where it's like I want it so that whenever you navigate down the sidewalk, right? Like if you're going over this street or you're going over this street, I don't want your navigation line, like the actual route that you take, to be like too circuitous, right? Like I don't want you to jut out and then over. I want you to follow, in a little bit more of a rounded way, if that makes sense. But if you're taking a left, then you take a hard left. Or if you're going across the street, well, you shift over and then you cross. So I think that is mapped quite nicely. This is mapped okay. I'm going to move this guy down. And this guy, I actually have already tagged the surface as paving stones. So, is it the exact right location of those paving stones? Probably not, but, whatever. This is concrete. Okay. We've gotten too distracted by this, this crossing area. But I think, getting these to be a little bit more internally consistent should be pretty nice. And then if we go down the street here, these are still okay. They're not great, but they're okay. I'm going to move this guy down a little bit and then maybe this guy over a little bit. But at this point, I realize that I'm just kind of fighting this larger issue in the area that isn't going to get solved tonight. So I'm going to leave it for the most part. And if we keep coming down, that's actually not bad. Like those are actually not too far off. So I don't feel like it's a little ways off. All right. I still am convinced that this is a net gain. And since I was the person who made these sidewalks to begin with, I'm willing to mess with them a little bit. Okay, so I said I would do more downtown mapping. So let's get these a little nicer looking. We'll get this guy here. Let's continue this guy up here. Well, bang. This is why I like going out in the field with a GPS unit, because I know GPSs aren't perfect, but man, they're pretty good. There's not a whole lot of guesswork you have to do anymore, because once you get the whole thing lined up with aerial imagery and you can see the spatial relationships between shapes using aerial imagery and your memories, it just becomes so much less of an issue to map things, because you have that harder data that generally works very well with the map and already looks very good and is generally the coordinates are generally pretty accurate. You start making headway just a whole lot faster that way. So definitely something I'm going to do a lot more in the future. Maybe I'll make a video about how I do that, because it's a bit of a complex process in some ways using this system that I often use. Okay. I'm gonna tag this as a separate way because it looks kind of like brick, but I'm not really sure, and I don't know where the line is over here, and I just don't really care that much. So I'm going to leave it as a separate way, but I'm not going to change its tags, just so like, you know, if someone comes by here with street complete or something, they'll be able to adjust it pretty quickly. Or like, you know, I'm setting them up for success is what I'm trying to say. Let's just put that guy right there, and we'll make that guy straight. And we're going to bring this guy down a little bit. I hesitate to edit these big streets because, like, you know, who am I to say where that street is? And we might, you know what? Let's do it. Let's look at that street in regular OpenStreetMap and see what the last edit was on it. So this is version 15, updating road surfaces. Okay. Source, National Network, CDOT Highway Data Explorer. Down below, we could look at the different versions. I'm not worried about it. I think it's fine. And if someone has a problem, we can deal with that. I think, as I said, I'm making it net positive change. So if there are a couple of issues with it, that's fine. Over here on the right, sometimes I forget where to enable the OpenStreetMap GPS traces. There it is. It's in overlays. Sometimes I'll turn that on and just see what we got, because every once in a while there's a really good one. This is kind of a mess, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. It actually does seem to be confirming that this could come down a little bit, which is great, because that's where I guessed it would be based on this aerial image offset. So there's a win right there. Maybe, just maybe, that is actually what's supposed to happen, is this is supposed to move down a little bit. So let's go with that for now. Okay. That looks okay. And you're going to come out just a little bit here. Yeah. Okay. I'm pretty happy with this. I think this is starting to look a little bit better here. It's so hard to figure out where that center point is. Hopefully someone will just come through and like do some sort of mass edit where they like make those center points better, but I don't know. Once I get the sidewalks honed in a little bit, it's kind of easier to like ballpark where that center line should be, just so like everything's generally lined up pretty nice. I think that looks pretty good. Okay. I'm really trusting myself here that I got this right, but you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. As I said earlier, though, if someone actually ends up watching this, thanks for watching. If you know a better way of doing some of the things that I'm doing, please reach out, and I would love to learn and do higher quality mapping in the future. Okay, these guys. So part of my goal here is just to get everything pretty consistently tagged. I mean, you know, I want if there's like a research project in the area or something, like someone can kind of trust this data a little bit more and like have fewer edge cases in their data, you know what I mean? So that's also part of what I'm trying to accomplish here. Like I'm going to select all of these crosswalks, and it doesn't look like there's any signals on this crosswalk. There might be, but there's not a traffic light. So I'm going to say there's only road markings. I think that is fine. And I think, don't quote me on this, but I think that's sort of like the commonly accepted OpenStreetMap default value. So it's like, it's not too crazy for me to put that there, even if it's like technically wrong. Okay, and then there's some more crosswalks. Cool. And that's lining up pretty well. Yeah, I'm starting to feel pretty good about this imagery offset. Other things might end up sort of slowly morphing to follow this offset because I suspect it's correct. Just based, I know these GPS traces are all over the place, but I do have a certain amount of trust that they're onto something. And like all too often they're right on, which is a good sign. Okay, I'm going to turn off GPS traces because that can be really distracting. And where were we? We were putting in sidewalks. So let's put in the sidewalk. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure. So this is a situation where there's so much to unpack here, right? Because it's like this sidewalk is clearly wrong, right? Like it is on top of a car right now. So something is wrong. Either the aerial imagery offset is wrong. I don't really think that's the case. I think that like I've decided to trust this offset. So let's go with that. I think that generally this offset's pretty good, and that's generally in the center line anyways. So what's going on here, right? Like, why is that sidewalk there? Well, I did put it there, but I put it there because I didn't want to get it too close to this building because it's obviously not like on top of the wall of the building. But is the building correct? Well, no, it's not correct at all. I mean, it looks like this side is generally okay. Oops. One of the things I consider when I'm looking at buildings is that the top of the building, like the perimeter of the roof, actually would have a different footprint on my image than the footprint of the building itself on the ground, right? Because there's vertical space there. And these aerial images usually aren't taken from directly above every building, right? So there is usually some, like, I guess you could call it distortion. And what it's looking like here is that the building is distorted. I'm moving that away just for a second so we can look at it. It looks like it's distorted to the south. In other words, at the top of the building, on the roof, it's further southeast than at the base of the building. And that's not literally the case. That's just how it looks in this image, right? Because of where the image was taken. This image was taken from the northwest, and that's why it's distorted in that way. But putting that corner back, because I'm not ready to edit this building yet, what that means here is that if we are going to trust our imagery offset, right, this wall on this side probably comes in a little bit, and this wall on this side also probably comes in a little bit. So the building, in other words, is smaller than it is currently mapped, which is just great. So I think what I'm going to do is bring this side in a bit, like so. It looks like it does cut off a little bit there. That's a little bit of an artistic move on my part, which I should be careful about, but I am fairly confident that's what that building is doing. So I'm going to go with it. And I'm going to bring this guy down too, just a tad, like so. Now I realize this is not perfect, but I do think this is better than what we had before. Now what's going on in here? I think this does come in a little bit more. And I think this comes out like so. We can't know where that corner is, right? So I'm going to just sort of generously guess because I think that's probably best. And this guy, I'm going to bring it into that corner, but as I said, it probably is smaller. But we can only do what we can do. And the next person who imports a better geospatial data set for this building can do better than me. I mean, it does look like there's more detail here with those like tiers, like the stair-stepping shape, but like this is a situation where I just have to decide what I care about, and I just don't think that's worth it. So I'm going to leave that how it is for now. I'm going to move this sidewalk in, keep that marked sidewalks or marked crosswalks straight. This is a situation where it doesn't really matter what the crossing looks like because this looks like a pretty small, like rarely used alley. Sometimes I'll put a marked crossing over an alley because it kind of feels like a, sorry, not a marked crossing, an unmarked crossing over the alley. But as I was kind of just saying, like, I just don't really think this is a useful enough place to put an unmarked crossing. Like it's fine. They just cross, you know what I mean? So I'm going to leave it. And then I'm going to put that guy right there and move that guy in just a touch so that it looks a little nicer. This is another situation where I'm going to just add a little bit more detail here. So I'm going to move this out. I'm going to add a node here on the edge of those surfaces and split it. Now I'm going to take this guy, shift click, oh, may I extend you? Oh, those aren't connected. Cool. So now I shift click, continue, perfect, bam, bam, like that. I'm going to go like that, and then we're going to straighten this guy out a little bit. That's looking a bit better. I'm going to pull this guy up a little bit too. I'm liking that a lot better already. And like, as I was saying earlier, even if this is still spatially wrong, I'm trying to make it more internally consistent where like, if the offset were adjusted, it would be correct. Because then hopefully if someone goes and gets some center lines for these sidewalks or these roads, which hopefully I'll be able to do someday, we can come in and edit this really quickly and get it exact, right? But until then, we just can't do that. We don't, I don't have the money to go send someone to Salida or take the time off to go to Salida right now and do this. So we're going to work with what we got. I'm going to select these marked crossings and use the basically the ID editor default settings for a marked crossing. That may or may not be a good idea, but I like the consistency of having everything tagged the same way, and hopefully that means that future editors will just have an easier time getting through here and tagging things themselves in a systematic way. If I select the sidewalk, it's going to warn me that those features cross, but they weren't tagged as such, so I'm going to connect those features with crossing nodes. And this is already looking so much better. My gosh. All right, we've done a lot of talking today and not a whole lot of mapping. So let's see if I can get a couple more pieces in here. That's a funny spot where there's like that tactile little area over here, but it's unclear like where that crossing leads. Like it doesn't really seem to be going anywhere. It's like if you want to go to your car or something. So that's kind of funny. That sidewalk just kind of like attaches there. You could probably argue with me whether or not this is a sidewalk, but I don't really want to have that argument, so I'm just going to leave it. Okay. Oops. That's the wrong button. There you go. Let's continue that down here. We're going to cross here the bike path that I just had worked on yesterday. I think it still looks pretty good. Although I think I chose pretty significantly different image offset in that situation. So, okay, this is very validating to me. Like, yes, these are off, but they're not so far off. Like, I just feel like we picked a pretty good image offset. This is pretty far off, and I'm going to move it over because I'm confident. I think that my image offset's good. And look at that. All of those things line up fairly well. And that is awesome because I haven't edited this area yet. It looks like this guy comes down here and sort of enters in a funny spot. Today's edit's kind of all over the place, but that's how it goes a lot of the time, to be honest. So we're just rolling with it. That's a parking aisle. I guess it's also a service road because of a slipway. Okay, I accept. Oh, this bridge goes over here. And this guy, we can add a little bit more detail to, and it crosses right here. Looking better already. And I think that's more like this. You know what I mean? I know that's in a shadow, but oops. I think that generally looks a little bit more accurate to what we're trying to do here. Cool. And then the other side of this bridge is a little bit shortened, and we'll also add just like a little bit. I like to add a little bit of buffer on those corners just so they don't look like hard turns when they're not. Like they're pretty easy little turns there. Okay. This guy is connecting a little far up, so I'm going to go like this. I'm really happy with that. I think that looks really good. And I'm not going to do all of the sidewalks in this area today, but I am going to throw in a couple of these marked crossings just so I can sort of mark some of the most basic situations here. It's hard to say where the marked crossing begins and ends over here, but I'm just going to say it goes right there. And you know what? While I'm over here, let's just do this parking lot, shall we? That's a weird one. I don't really think I'm getting it spot on, but it's better than nothing. I think I covered my bases pretty well there. I'm going to call that good. And we'll search for a parking feature, parking lot. Perfecto. All right. Yeah, I'm making myself a little sad here because it's clear that my image offset was different when I chose to map that trail. And so it's like, you know, one of these things is going to have to change. And I don't know which. That's all right. You can't win them all. All right. So let's go down here and connect this bad boy. I'm happy with that. And so this is a situation over here where like the sidewalks basically stopped. You know, like this is bad design for an urban area, especially in a downtown area like this. I mean, this is a Safeway, right? Like, I guess people are just walking in front of the Safeway a lot of the time, or they're taking this established bike route. Hard to say, but I don't know. It's just a funny little spot where the sidewalk just stops. Okay. Let's connect these guys right here. You are a sidewalk. And let's connect these guys right here. This is an image offset area over here that I am not going to worry about right now. I realize that these are inconsistent and that makes me sad, but there's only so much I can do in one session. And in the future, I'll try to come in with more data. Hopefully Salida will become a place that I edit with frequency and I spend some time sort of studying the shape, the relative shape of these areas, which I have done in like Williamsburg, for example, at William and Mary. Like I can smell where the problems are because like I've just seen them so many times. Like, you know, I'm not always right, but I usually have a pretty good intuition of what's going on because like, there's patterns that you start to notice when you map a place like this for long enough. Okay. We're just trying to make this navigable. Oh, someone put a little crossing right here. How sweet. How very kind. Oh, yes. You are good, my dude. Oop, you're not a sidewalk. You're a marked crossing. You're not my mother. You're a snort. It's a really good book. Okay. Let's put you right here. I like to sort of bend. Here, let me just connect these features real quick. I like to bend the sidewalks out a little bit, right? Instead of just making it a hard 90-degree corner here. Like clearly there's a bank of sorts here, right? Where the sidewalk banks out into the corner, which is great, by the way. It slows the cars down a little bit, which always is better. But I like to represent that a little bit with the shape of the sidewalks. So like I like to pull them out a little bit and then a little bit back in. Does that make sense? I think it just looks a little cleaner and it's a little bit more descriptive of what's actually going on the street here. I can't really see in that shadow. I'm not going to really worry about it, but it does look like there's a sidewalk there. So I'm going to leave that as a dangling end, which will get dealt with one day. I'm going to make you a little prettier with another line. I think that looks great. Okay. And then I'm going to put you over here like so. Oh, perfect. Connect the features. Okay. And then this last one is going to go between here and here. I think that looks quite dandy. And when I hit the connect the features button here, it automatically sometimes snaps to an existing node on that other way which can be really frustrating. Like, I often hate that it does that because that other node might not be something I want to touch for one reason or another. But in this situation, it was handy because there was an existing crossing node that I'm trying to connect to, right? You don't want multiple crossing nodes on the same way for the same crossing. Map everything once. Okay, so we have that area pretty well established, and now I'm going to connect these bad babies. Here is a pretty nasty example of some wonky stuff going on here. Actually, I feel like this can come in a little bit because if you look at the rest of that intersection, it does look pretty okay, everything else. So it does look like I just kind of messed up this little area here a bit. And that should be pretty nice. And we'll go like this. Yeah. I'm happy with that. I think that looks pretty good. All right. I'm going to call it quits for this time around pretty soon here, but I figure I'll just add a couple more. I say this every time, like just a couple more sidewalks, and then I've made 300 edits, and ID warns me about not having enough space to save my changes anymore. Sidewalk is very close but not connected to alley. Yes, I know, because I wanted to put an unmarked crossing in here. This just, from vibes, like this looks like an asphalty place with a lot of cars. Like, this looks like a real crossing someone might want to know about. So I add an unmarked crossing because there's no crossing markers painted on the street. So it's an unmarked crossing. These guys I'm going to all grab, straighten them, clean up their tags a little bit. I think that looks quite nice. And this guy, let's connect this guy down here. Ba-bang. Sidewalk, connect the features. So there's a node on those two sidewalks. I really like this style of mapping here. I think it looks nice. I'm going to pull this guy in a little bit like so. Perfect. That looks nice. All right. And then why don't we connect these guys as well? Nice. Those snapped into place pretty well, and I think they look pretty good considering all of the things we have messed with today. Okay, and those are all pretty nicely aligned. Those are all pretty nicely aligned. Wow, good work, everybody. I'm going to normalize these tags to match all the other ones. I really don't reckon there are any signals at that intersection anyways, so it's probably a good thing. Okay, and I was the one who put these in, so I feel bad going back over my work, but it happens. Oh, and those line up great. Good. Okay. Starting to feel a little bit more confident about this. Those are unmarked crossings, and that's a marked crossing. How wonderful. Okay. Yes, yes. See, now it's like you come into this area where everything's lined up so prettily, and it's like, this is what a map is supposed to look like. Let's put this up here. Nice. Okay, I'm feeling pretty happy about this aerial image offset, and I'm feeling more confident that it does actually represent a bit better what's going on. What's going on? All right. Sweet. Park Avenue is so like bumpy. Like, look how much it goes up and down across the length of the street here. I don't know what to do about that, but we'll worry about that another time. That looks to me like an unmarked crossing. Let's do it. Maybe there's a blockade, but I doubt it. Actually, let's see if there's any Bing street side imagery, shall we? This is a fun one. It's photo overlays. I always forget where to find it over here. Okay, there is not. So, never mind. Did I put a note here? This feels like the type of thing I would have done is put a note. Yeah, I did. All right. Well, I'll delete this and let the note speak for itself. I asked, does the sidewalk connect? Hard to tell. It is hard to tell. Okay. Sometimes I'm a bit more picky than other times. That day I was feeling picky and I wanted to know exactly what was going on. Okay. At this point, I feel like I'm kind of venturing into a whole nother project, so I feel like this is a good time to call it quits. Oh, that's interesting. So here's a situation where the sidewalk is concrete across. See, if... Oh, I'm just trying to get the sidewalk to disappear for a second. So you see how it's concrete all the way across? Like it looks like it's the same paving stones, perhaps. I don't know for sure, but that's what it looks like. Like it's sidewalk first, and that road is like built around the sidewalk almost. Not really, but like almost. To me, that means it's not a crossing, like separately tagged crossing. To me, that means it's sidewalk with the road crossing it. If that makes sense. So like sidewalk crosses Vine Street. I'm going to connect the features and I'm going to call it an unmarked crossing. Oops. Unmarked crossing. But I'm not going to put the like crossing line on it because I would almost argue that the crossing is happening on the street side. Like the street is crossing the sidewalk in this situation. That might be a little bit of a political stance that I'm taking, but hey, someone else can fix that or change that if they so please. All right. And I'm going to call you an unmarked crossing too. So once again, somewhat of a political move there, but you know, I don't think anyone's going to come banging on my door about this specific crossing that I tagged in my own personal style this one time. Okay. So this is a situation where I'm actually going to cut these and I'm going to disconnect them and I'm going to overlap them like this. And then I'm going to connect them again because I think that looks nicer and it better reflects what's actually going on in the real world. And this is an unmarked crossing. I just said I would end this video, so this will be my last one. Unmarked crossing. Ba-bang. Cool. Well, we've made a lot of sporadic progress. I've tried to sort of talk through my thinking on a lot of these tagging decisions that I've made. As you can see, like a lot of it is just what I'm feeling like. But I try to keep it as close to what is actually going on the street as possible. And of course, the next person to come through here can choose to update my sidewalks and put them in better spots if they have better data, and that will be awesome. But until then, we will have something that people can use, and that's going to be good. Alrighty. Thank you so much for watching. See ya.